ChatGPT has one really big problem. Way too many models. If you've ever opened it up and felt overwhelmed by all the different weird names and which one you're meant to pick, you're not alone. I was struggling as well, so I did a bit of research, a bit of digging. Now that I know which model to use, and honestly, it works so much better for me, and I'm frustrated that OpenAI has made it so confusing because their names make no sense at all. But hopefully this video will help clear it up for you and you can use the right model for the right problem. All right, let's get into it. If you want to skip ahead, then here are timestamps for everything in this video. Here are some key AI terms which you may or may not know, which I think are really helpful. LLM, Large Language Model. This is an AI that has been trained on a huge amount of text-based data, which helps it to understand and predict what kind of text it should generate next. Now, LLMs are kind of your main sort of AI text-based things that you see people using. Your ChatGPT, your Google Gemini, your Claude. There are all sorts of other types of AIs, but we're not going to get into that today. Token or tokens. So a token is basically a word. It's actually just under a word, but essentially whenever you're interacting with like a ChatGPT model, you're giving a bunch of tokens when you have your prompt, and then it's outputting a bunch of tokens. Each time you're going back and forth with a really big prompt, and then you're trying to tweak what the output is, you're using up your tokens. Models, which are the different types of like AI that you can use, all have token limits. Some have really big ones and some have little ones. And if you use up your token limit, then the output starts to degrade. So it starts forgetting things that you said earlier. And that's why you get these weird hallucinations sometimes, which I'll get into in a minute. Context window. Context window is basically AI's short-term memory. The bigger the window, the better the memory, the better the outputs generally, not always. So the easiest way to think of this is it's basically the amount of tokens that your model has. So for instance, Google Gemini has a really huge 1 million tokens, which means that it can read like a 500-page document and remember what was in that document. Whereas like certain ChatGPT models, they've got like a 32,000 token window. So there's no way they could like read an entire book and hold all of it. They would just take pieces out of it and put it in. Context windows are really important right now because different models are kind of competing on who is the biggest one. But I think over time, context windows are just going to kind of be equal across the board and not that important. But for now, they are actually pretty important. Hallucination or hallucinating. This is when AI gives confidently wrong or just completely made up information. Because these LLMs are predictive models, they're just trying to figure out what the next most likely thing to say is. And that creates these hallucinations where it just gives its best guess, but it says it in such a way that it seems like it's accurate. We saw this just recently with Google search and their AI, where if you asked it like a phrase that doesn't exist, it would then confidently try and come up with the answer because it knows that people say all these funny sayings like, you know, 2 birds, 1 stone, and it knows those meanings. So if you give it another kind of saying, it will just sort of predict, well, if that's how that one works, then this must be this way. But it will say it in such a way that it seems like it's factual, but it's not. This is getting better. It used to be terrible. Like all the models were bad for it. Now it doesn't happen so much, but that's almost worse because when it does hallucinate, you might not realize because everything else is truthful and then 1 or 2 facts are not. So you definitely want to be aware of hallucination. Multimodal. This is a model that can handle multiple inputs and outputs. So rather than being just text, it can also handle images, perhaps music, even videos. Some of the newer models are multimodal, and it seems like the industry's heading this way where they'll be able to, but there's still a bunch that aren't. Depending on what model you are using, it might be multimodal or it might not be. We'll get into that later. Omni. So you'll hear about, you know, ChatGPT 4.0 or 4 Omni. Omni means everything or all in one. And really it just means multimodal, like we just talked about. So it's basically ChatGPT 4 multimodal. They don't want to call it that, so they call it Omni, and then they shorten that again for some reason to O. So it's ChatGPT 4.0. Mini. So you'll see Mini next to a couple of the models. It's basically that it's a smaller version of the model that is faster and costs less money to run. If you're just using ChatGPT in your browser, then to be honest, you're not going to really need the minis. Minis are more for people that are using the API. So they're trying to make like an app or something like that. And they're paying per tokens. Remember we were talking about tokens before. Different models cost different amounts. And the minis aren't nearly as good, but they're a lot cheaper. So if you're running like a chatbot for some sort of business, then you probably want to use a mini because that brings your overheads, your costs down. But for most everyday users, the minis aren't really relevant except for the fact that they are a lot faster. But in my experience, they're not nearly as good. So I typically avoid using the minis. ChatGPT model breakdown. 4.0 or 4 Omni. The versatile all-rounder. Free version of ChatGPT that most people use day to day. Interestingly, I've observed that people that have the paid ChatGPT plan typically still use this model because they don't know that they should switch. It's a fast, powerful, multimodal model that most people use every single day. It can handle text, images, and audio inputs. Best for everyday tasks, general questions, and conversational AI. Creative projects like brainstorming and visual storytelling. 4.0 is the model that most people are using to generate these sort of AI images that you always see. 4.0 is good. It's like your base model. It's like your smartphone, you know, that can handle text, image, video, voice. It can do everything, but it's not finely tuned. It's kind of like your generic, your basic B of AI.
Basic meaning simple or basic meaning basic?
4.5 Orion, the empathetic conversationalist. This is a paid model. So this model is currently in a research preview, which means that not everyone has it, but most people do. It was designed specifically for natural, human-like dialogue. It's really good with empathetic interactions. And in my personal opinion, it is the best model for creative writing or content creation. It's well known for having a smooth kind of conversational feel, but it's also more likely to hallucinate or lie.
No, it's not lying. It's a discretion.
Because it's kind of, it's doing that natural thing where it will exaggerate or bend the truth a little bit.
It's lying.
But it is a really good model for interacting with about sort of problems and things like that. Best for conversational interactions that need a bit of, emotional sensitivity. So this is really good if you have like a problem with your relationship or even work, and you want it to kind of help you figure that out and how to solve it. 4.5 is very good at kind of understanding where you're coming from and helping paint the perspectives of other people as well. Brainstorming, creative writing, storytelling. As I mentioned before, this model is the best for that. It is really good for social media content. It has a sort of authentic voice to it, which the other models don't really have so much. But this model is being frequently used as a sort of therapist, which I don't know, there's mixed opinions on if that's a good thing or not. But this model really does feel like your own kind of personal therapist. It does have a quite small limit, even on the paid plan, of how much you can use it, because it's quite an intensive model that costs a lot to run. But it's a really good model. It's probably one of my favorites to use. It's really good for certain things that require that kind of thinking, but it's not so good at like coding or sort of mathematical problems or anything like that. 4.1, the Precision Expert. This is a paid model. It's optimized for detailed instructions, technical tasks, and precise instruction following. It's really accurate and it's well known to be quite good at coding. Now, the API, remember that's separate to the browser one, has a 1 million context window, which is huge. And that's kind of how this model is being talked about. But if you're using the browser, which most people are, like the chatgpt.com, then it's only a 32,000 token context window, which is actually really small and not very good for coding and things like that. I think eventually this model will be 1 million on the browser as well, but right now it's not. Best for complex coding tasks. So writing, debugging, or just reviewing code. Detailed document analysis. So it's quite good at looking at really big documents if you have that full 1 million context window. Otherwise, I'd recommend you use NotebookLM, which is a free tool from Google. It's superior in my opinion.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
So 4.1 is quite accurate. It doesn't hallucinate as much as some of the other models. If your prompt is really specific and you've you have very specific instructions, 4.1 is really good for that. O3, the deep thinker. This is a paid model. This model is specialized for deep thinking and following a multi-stepped reasoned approach. So it will kind of come up with an output and then it will question that output. And you can see some really cool things where it will go research online, and as it gets new information, it will then change its thinking. If you've used deep research before, then O3 has a sort of mini deep research built into a lot of its outputs, especially if you click web search when you're asking it to do something. So it's quite a cool model. It's quite a powerful model. It's quite good for analysis and problem solving. Just the other day, I used this model to find a setting on my washing machine that would make my shirts not so crinkled. And it went out online, found it, and then built me a little guide on exactly how I could use my washing machine and what logos to look for and everything. So it's really good for that kind of stuff. Best for advanced research and academic analysis. So like I said before, it's very similar to deep research if you've used that, particularly with web search enabled, but it's faster, though not as thorough, but it is really good for that. Multi-step logic, math, and problem solving, quite good with that, but unlike 4.5 that has that kind of empathy, in my experience, and I know from other users, O3 is a lot more sort of, focused. There's not much emotion. It's very logical, which can be good, but maybe not good all the time. It also seems to love giving outputs as tables, which, sometimes that's good, sometimes it's not. You can just ask it, don't use tables, but then it will quickly default back to them shortly after. It's also really good for workflows and professional use cases, so like gathering a whole bunch of information and then kind of siphoning through that information to present sort of results and things like that. O3 is basically like Sherlock Holmes, it's sort of a detective, very focused, but kind of misses the human element. So really good if you need sort of clear instructions on something mechanical or, coding, anything like that. But I wouldn't ask O3 for advice on your life problems, because it's going to give you a kind of robot-like set of events to follow. But it is really good for sort of that technical understanding, technical writing. Don't use O3 for your creative writing. It will be quite flat. Then the minis. So you got 4.1 mini, O4 mini, and then O4 mini high. These are basically the quick responders, and they're paid at this point in time. What they are? Smaller, faster, more cost-effective versions of their counterparts. So they're not as effective as any of the models that they are, but they're a lot quicker, which means they cost less to run. They're optimized for speed, efficiency, and affordability. Mainly, you're going to use these mini models if you are using the API and you have, a chatbot or your own program or something like that, and you're paying per token use. If you're an everyday user that's just online on the browser, I actually wouldn't recommend using the minis unless you've sort of run out of use for the other models. But the minis still have a place. They are a lot faster, so if you wanted it to be faster, then sweet. But otherwise, probably just avoid the minis. They're not really that useful for the day-to-day use. And just a quick mention, Google has a bunch of really cool models now, mainly Gemini, but they've also got this NotebookLM, which is amazing. And best of all, their models, they have a paid plan, but the free plan lets you use all their models, and you have a limited amount of uses, but you can use all of them for free, which, ChatGPT doesn't have that right now. Gemini 2.5 Flash. So this is basically your 4.0 equivalent. It's multimodal, it's quick. Gemini 2.5 Pro. So this is kind of like a mix between, I'd say, like the 4.5 with its creative sort of empathetic thinking, and then the O3 that can go research and is quite logical. This is sort of the blend between the both, and this is the one that is, you get less free uses. So a really good model though, highly recommend. It's advanced, it's multimodal, and it can just have really good outputs. It's good for both coding and being creative, creative writing. And it has a much larger context window. NotebookLM. So this is a separate offshoot of Google, and it got quite famous for being able to generate podcasts.
We were informed by the show's producers that we're not human.
We're not real. We're AI, artificial intelligence. This whole time, everything, all our memories, our families,
Yeah.
it's all been fabricated.
I don't understand.
which is actually quite powerful. So you can drop in books or articles and it can then generate a podcast for you on that subject. I use it all the time now, highly recommend. But NotebookLM is particularly notable because it doesn't really hallucinate.
It's not a lie.
It will only use the sources that you've uploaded and then it will tell you about them. But it is not creative at all. Do not get it to try and write something based on those articles. It can only really use what it has in them. So it will give you quite a dry output. If you need to quickly go through lots of documents at once, or you're looking for pieces within documents, like, I don't know, you're studying and you're writing like an essay or a thesis, NotebookLM is great for that. Highly recommend you check it out. How to choose the right model. For general, non-complex tasks, anything sort of multimodal, or, you know, your like everyday interactions, then ChatGPT 4.0 is perfect. If you want empathetic, conversational, a sort of therapist, or you're doing some creative writing, then 4.5 is perfect for that. If you want technical precision, you're doing some coding, you want that to be reviewed, then 4.1 is the model. If you want to be able to do some deep research, or you have a sort of multi-step problem, something complex but largely logical, then 03 is going to be the model for you. But just remember, it's not the best with being creative. It's a bit more logical. And if you want quick responses that are cost effective and don't require much context, then any one of the mini models, but thinking of how I've explained the models, any one of them is going to be useful for you. And that's a high level of the different models you have available. Now, picking the best model isn't about just, you know, picking the latest one that's out. Hopefully you've seen from this that they each serve kind of different purposes. I wouldn't use 4.5, the empathetic creative one, to try and, you know, like review my coding. That wouldn't be the best use case. And the output I would get, I'd think, oh man, this isn't very good. Where if I switched it to 4.1 or maybe 03, then I'm going to get a way better output. So it's just about being aware of your models and sort of which model is right for that problem. So if you ever have an output from ChatGPT and you think, ah, man, this wasn't very good, then rather than trying your prompt again, though that might be an issue, I don't know, but try changing the model, you know, try experiment and just do the same thing again and see what's different. Now, if you do want to get better at prompting, I have an amazing video for that. Or if you want to make your own custom GPT by feeding it books using this amazing method, then you got to check out this video. Honestly, this is the one to watch. Really, this is a good video. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. I'd really appreciate if you could like and subscribe in particular. Every subscription helps me so much. It helps me make these videos. I really appreciate it. Stay tuned for more free updates like this, and all the best. Good luck. Catch ya.